My name is Clara Whitfield. I am 31 years old. And the night my boyfriend told me to stay in the kitchen because he was embarrassed to have his friends see me, I did exactly what he asked. I walked back through that doorway, closed it behind me, and stood at the sink in my own home with the lights dimmed and the laughter of people I'd never met drifting under the door like smoke. I stood there for 11 minutes. I counted every single one, and in those 11 minutes, something shifted in me so completely that the woman who walked back out of that kitchen at the end of the night was not the same woman who had walked in. What Marcus didn't know was that I had been building something for 14 months that he had no idea existed. He didn't know about the savings account. He didn't know about the business. He didn't know about the conversation I'd had with a property lawyer 3 weeks earlier, or the document sitting in a folder on my laptop titled simply with the words, "When I'm ready." He thought I was crying over the sink. I was making a decision. This is that story. Before I tell you how it ended, I want to pause right here because this kind of story doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it didn't happen to me in one. I want to know where you are in the world right now. Drop your city or your country in the comments and tell me what time it is there. Midnight in Manchester, morning in Melbourne, Tuesday afternoon in Texas. I genuinely want to know. And if you are someone who has ever been made to feel small by the person who was supposed to choose you first, if this kind of story lands somewhere real in your chest, please subscribe and stay with me. Because what happens next took 14 months to build and about 45 seconds to arrive. I met Marcus Hale at a trade conference in Columbus, Ohio, in the spring 3 years before this story ends. I was 28. He was 34. He was the kind of man who dressed well, opened doors, and had an opinion about every wine on the list. He worked in commercial insurance brokerage, drove a silver BMW he leased, and never mentioned that detail, and had the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having had to prove yourself to anyone who mattered. I was, at the time, working as an interior design consultant for a mid-size residential firm called Hargrove Design Partners based in Columbus. I had been there for 4 years. I was good at my job in a quiet way that my clients noticed, and my manager occasionally forgot to mention to the partners. I billed the second highest number of client hours in the firm 2 years running. My name appeared on a grand total of 2 office emails celebrating that fact. Marcus and I dated for 8 months before he suggested I move into his house. His house. That detail matters. The property at 19 Maplewood Court in the Bexley neighborhood of Columbus was a 3-bedroom craftsman-style home that Marcus had purchased with a down payment his parents provided when he was 29. It was a beautiful house. Hardwood floors throughout, original millwork on the windows, a kitchen with subway tile, and a farmhouse sink. I know every inch of that kitchen because I spent a significant portion of the last 2 years of my life in it. When Marcus suggested I move in, I was paying $1,400 a month for my own apartment on the east side. The offer made financial sense, and I was in love in the way that makes financial sense feel romantic. I gave up my apartment in October of the year we met. I moved my furniture into the house, and most of it ended up in the spare bedroom because Marcus had strong opinions about the aesthetic of his living space. And my taste, he said gently but repeatedly, was a little eclectic. I want to give you 2 specific examples of what the next 2 years looked like before I tell you about the kitchen incident, because without context, the kitchen sounds like a single bad moment. It was not a single bad moment. It was the last scene of a very long production. The first example is from 14 months before the kitchen. We were invited to his colleague Devin's birthday dinner at a restaurant downtown. A group of 9, Marcus's work friends and their partners. I had spent more time than I should have getting ready because I wanted to make a good impression. I wore a navy wrap dress I had bought specifically for this kind of evening. We arrived, we were seated, and within the first 20 minutes Marcus leaned toward me and said, quietly enough that only I could hear, "You don't have to talk so much. These guys are pretty alpha. They don't love when the girls dominate." I had said at that point exactly 3 sentences. One introducing myself, one about the restaurant's wine selection, and one responding to a direct question from Devin's girlfriend about where I worked. I spent the rest of dinner monitoring the volume of my own voice the way you monitor a gas gauge. By the time we got home, I had a headache behind my left eye that lasted 2 days. The second example is from 7 months before the kitchen. Marcus's mother, Patrice, visited for a long weekend. She is a 62-year-old woman from Dayton who has a firm opinion about how a home should be run and communicates those opinions with the warmth of a building inspector. On the Saturday of her visit, I had prepared lunch: roasted chicken, a grain salad, a loaf of sourdough I had made from scratch. Patrice sat down, looked at the table, and said to Marcus, not to me, to Marcus, while I was sitting 12 inches away, "She needs to learn to set a proper table. The forks are wrong." Marcus laughed. Not an awkward laugh, not an apologetic laugh, a real one, a fond one. "Mom, she's doing her best." He said it the way you say it about a child who has drawn you a misshapen horse. He did not correct her. He did not say, "Clara sets a beautiful table." He passed her the bread and changed the subject. I got up and fixed the forks. I am telling you these stories not because they are the worst things that happened. I am telling you because they were the texture of those 2 years, the constant calibration, the constant shrinking. By the time we arrived at the night of the kitchen, I had become a significantly smaller version of the person who had moved into that house. Now let me tell you about the 14 months of silence that ran parallel to all of that. Because while I was moving through Marcus's world as a quieter, smaller, more careful version of myself, I was also doing something else entirely. It started the month after the dinner where I was told not to talk. I came home from a client consultation at Hargrove, where I had, for the 3rd time 6 months, been given a note of praise about a project, and then watched a male colleague named Brett present that project to the partners in a meeting I was not invited to. I sat in my car in the Hargrove parking lot for 19 minutes. When I drove home, I did not go inside. I drove past the house, went to a coffee shop on 5th Avenue called Groundwork, ordered an oat milk latte I could not afford given what I was about to do, and opened a new Google document. I named it Whitfield Design Studio. I want to be very clear about what this was and was not. It was not a dramatic gesture of rebellion. It was not a fantasy. It was a document, a list of everything I already knew how to do and everything I would need to learn. Over the following 3 weeks, I filled 47 bullet points across 6 categories: client acquisition, licensing and LLC formation, accounting basics, portfolio development, pricing structure, and digital presence. I gave myself 18 months. Then I revised it to 14 when I realized I already had more than I thought. Over the next 6 months, I worked from 6 to 8 every morning before Marcus woke up. He is not a morning person. He considers sleeping past 8 a point of pride. Those 2 hours every day were mine in a way that no other hours in that house were. I formed the LLC, Whitfield Design Studio, in January through Ohio's online portal for $1,100. I opened a business checking account at a credit union on the other side of Columbus where Marcus did not bank. I started building a portfolio website using a platform I had taught myself at 6 in the morning with coffee and headphones. I migrated 3 of my existing Hargrove clients, all of them women who had specifically requested to work with me and had, on multiple occasions, expressed frustration when they were handed off to someone else mid-project. I did not poach them. I told them I was starting something independent and that I would love to work with them if they ever had a project outside of the Hargrove relationship. 2 of the 3 came to me with new projects within 60 days. By the 7th month, Whitfield Design Studio had 4 active clients and a project backlog worth roughly $42,000. I kept all of this in a folder on my personal laptop, which I password protected not out of paranoia, but out of habit. I had learned by then to keep the things that were mine in places where they stayed mine. I also, around month 9, began quietly repositioning my finances. I had been contributing to shared household costs since I moved in, but the arrangement had never been formalized. I paid approximately $1,100 a month toward utilities, groceries, and what Marcus called house maintenance, but which in practice meant whatever needed replacing that he did not feel like paying for alone. I began incrementally reducing the discretionary portions of that contribution while increasing what I deposited into my personal savings, not dramatically, not in a way that would register in a week or a month, but steadily. By month 12, I had $22,000 in a savings account Marcus did not know existed, I had spoken once to a property lawyer named Christine Daly about the legal nature of my position as a long-term non-married resident, contributing financially to a home I had no title to. The conversation was 40 minutes long and cost me $320, and it was among the most clarifying conversations of my life. Christine told me what I had suspected. I had no legal claim to the property, but I also had no legal obligation to it. My name was on nothing, which meant leaving required nothing except packing. That last detail sat in my mind for a week. My name was on nothing, in a house I had lived in for 2 years, where I had refinished a bathroom floor, planted a kitchen garden in the side yard, repainted the guest room, and fixed the front porch screen twice. My name was on nothing. It was not a wound, it was information, and I filed it exactly where it belonged. It was the 13th Saturday of the year, the one in late March, when Marcus told me that his friends Ryan and Cole and their girlfriends were coming over. He mentioned this at 9 in the morning while I was making coffee, and he was looking at his phone, not as an invitation, as a scheduling note. "These guys are a different crowd," he said, still looking at the screen, very finance adjacent, a little status conscious. "You know how it is." I handed him his coffee and did not say anything. "Just maybe keep a lower profile tonight, yeah? Let them get comfortable before you're in the mix." He said this the way you say, "There's traffic on 71, take Broad Street," like it was helpful information for my journey. I said, "Sure." He smiled at his phone. He did not look up. They arrived at 7:43 in the evening. I know this because I looked at the clock on the microwave when I heard the first car in the driveway. Ryan Calder was Marcus's old college friend, now working at an investment firm downtown. Cole Barber was a client who had become a social fixture. Their girlfriends, Amber and Jess, were both in their late 20s, both beautiful, both the kind of polished that takes significant daily effort and looks effortless. They were perfectly fine people who had done nothing to me and probably knew nothing about what their evening had cost me before it started. Marcus met them at the door. I came out of the bedroom where I had been working, wearing a cream-colored blouse and dark jeans, my hair down. I came out to say hello because it was my home, and I had lived there for 2 years, and it did not cross my mind that there was another option. Marcus saw me in the hallway, and his face did something brief and specific that I had learned to read over 26 months. A micro-contraction around the eyes, a fractional tightening of the jaw. "Hey," he said, and then immediately turned back to the group and started doing introductions without including me in them. I extended my hand to Ryan anyway. He shook it, polite but clearly processing who I was. Amber smiled warmly. Marcus said, with that particular casual brightness that is only available to people who have rehearsed something, "Why don't you grab some more of those apps from the kitchen, babe? The charcuterie tray needs more of the small plates." He was looking at me. He was smiling. It was a stage direction, not a request. I looked at him for 1.5 seconds. I counted. Then I turned and walked back into the kitchen. The door swung shut behind me, and I stood at the farmhouse sink, in the house I had lived in for 2 years, in the kitchen I had personally recalked, and whose garden herbs were growing on the windowsill in 4 small clay pots I had painted myself on a Sunday afternoon, and I listened to the party I was not allowed to be part of begin on the other side of a door. 11 minutes. I stood there for 11 minutes. I want you to picture those 11 minutes because they matter. The sound of laughter, a wine glass on the coffee table. Marcus doing his version of the story about the time he almost bought a boat. I know that story. I have heard it 14 times. I heard it now in pieces through a hollow core door. And I felt something drain out of me so completely and so quietly that I almost didn't notice it going. What left in those 11 minutes was the last remaining uncertainty I had been carrying. I had been telling myself a version of this story where things might still change, where Marcus might still choose me in the way that counted, where the house might still become something it had not yet been. That version left the kitchen that night before I did. I picked up my phone. I texted Christine Daly. "I'm ready." It was 8:14 in the evening. She responded within 3 minutes with a single thumbs-up emoji, which I found deeply satisfying coming from a property lawyer on a Saturday night. I put my phone in my back pocket, picked up the charcuterie tray, added the small plates Marcus had requested, and walked back out into the living room with a completely neutral expression, because I had already made my decision, and nothing that happened for the rest of that evening required me to change my face. If you are still with me right now, and any part of this is landing somewhere real, maybe not a kitchen, maybe a conference room, maybe a dinner table where someone described you using the words "she's doing her best," I want you to drop a comment below. Tell me what your kitchen was. Where was the place you stood in silence and counted the minutes? Because I don't think I'm the only one. And if this kind of story is the thing you come to when you need to hear that the silence was building something, please subscribe. Because the next part of this story is what I built. I want to take you through the 2 weeks between that Saturday night and the Tuesday evening when it was over, because the story is in the specifics. Sunday morning I woke up at 5:58 and lay in the dark beside Marcus for 11 minutes, which felt appropriate given the accounting. Then I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and the folder labeled "When I'm Ready." I opened it for the first time in 3 weeks and read through every page. The lease termination clause for Whitfield Design Studios' pending studio space. A 900-square-foot suite in a building on Gay Street in downtown Columbus I had toured twice and quietly reserved with a refundable deposit of $1,500 7 weeks earlier. The moving company contact information. The checklist. I made one phone call that morning at 8:45 to a woman named Sandra Park, who runs a residential moving company called Park and Move out of Westerville. I had her number saved because I had referred 2 clients to her over the past year. I explained my situation in 3 sentences and asked if she had availability in 2 weeks. She said she had a Tuesday that would work. I told her I would confirm by Monday night. She said, "Honey, I'll block it for you right now." Sandra is 63 years old and has been helping people move their lives out of the wrong situations for 27 years, and she understood the subtext without me providing it. Marcus and I spent Sunday together in the way we had spent most Sundays for 2 years. He watched football. I worked. He made a comment at lunch about the crackers I had bought being a store brand. I noted it and filed it in the category of things that would stop mattering in 13 days. Monday I called Christine daily from my car on my lunch break. We reviewed the situation in 15 minutes. I had no lease, no title, no co-signed utilities. The Wi-Fi router was mine. I had purchased it 14 months ago when the previous one died, and Marcus handed me his card and said, "Grab one of those while you're at the hardware store." I had paid with my own card by accident, and he had never reimbursed me, and neither of us had ever mentioned it again. Christine confirmed what I already knew. I was free to take everything I had brought into that house and leave. There was no legal complication. There was only the practical question of timing and execution. I gave Hargrove Design Partners my resignation on Tuesday, effective in 2 weeks. My manager, Linda, who is a genuinely decent person trapped inside a genuinely indifferent institution, looked at me for a long moment across her desk and said, "I hope you're not leaving because of the Brett thing." I said, "I'm leaving because I'm starting my own studio." She said, "Of course you are." Then she said, "Can I be your first referral?" I said yes. She sent me a client the following week with a project worth $18,000. I spent the next 9 days packing with a precision that was almost meditative. I did not pack dramatically or aggressively. I packed the way you pack when you are organizing your own life back into your own possession. Every book I had brought, every piece of artwork I had hung, every kitchen tool I had purchased, and that was most of them, because Marcus's contribution to the Maplewood Court kitchen before I moved in had been a can opener, a lodge skillet, and an enthusiasm for ordering delivery. The 4 clay herb pots from the windowsill, the refinished bathroom mirror I had bought at an estate sale for $35 and stripped and resealed over 2 weekends. My grandmother's quilt from the guest room closet. Every morning I moved 3 or 4 boxes to my car before Marcus woke up and drove them to Sandra's storage unit, which she offered me for free for the 2-week transition period because Sandra Park is a person who deserves more credit than this story can give her. Marcus did not notice. I want to be very clear about this because it is both the saddest detail and the most clarifying one. I removed the physical evidence of 2 years of my presence from a house over the course of 9 days, in increments before 8 every morning, and the man I lived with did not notice a single departure. Not the missing books on the hallway shelf, not the absence of the bathroom mirror, not the empty hooks in the entryway where 3 of my jackets had hung for 2 years. He was not a monster. He was simply someone who had stopped seeing me so long ago that my disappearance registered as nothing unusual. The Tuesday of the move arrived. Marcus left for work at 8:17. I watched his BMW pull out of the driveway from the bedroom window. Sandra's truck arrived at 9. We loaded the remaining furniture. My reading chair, my drafting desk, my bedroom dresser, with the help of 2 of Sandra's crew, in 2 hours and 40 minutes. They were efficient and kind, and one of them, named Felix, helped me carry the drafting desk down the narrow staircase with the care of someone handling something that mattered. Before I locked the front door for the last time, I did 3 things. The first was that I unplugged the Wi-Fi router from the office upstairs, coiled the cable neatly, and put it in my bag. It was mine. It had been mine for 14 months. I took it back. The second thing I did was walk through every room one final time, not because I was sentimental about the space, but because I wanted to be certain I was leaving nothing of mine behind. I wasn't. The third thing I did was walk to the electrical panel in the utility room off the kitchen. I opened it, and I switched the main breaker to off. Not as a punishment, not as a grand gesture. The power account was in Marcus's name, and I was no longer a resident. I was simply ensuring that utilities I was no longer responsible for were not running in a home I no longer occupied. I closed the panel, closed the utility room door, walked to the front door, and locked it with my key from the outside. I posted the key back through the mail slot because it was his house and his key. I heard it land on the hardwood floor on the other side with a small, flat, final sound. Sandra was waiting at the curb. "All good," she said. "All good," I said. We drove to the Gay Street studios, first to drop the drafting desk, then to my new apartment on 3rd Avenue, a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor with a window facing east that I had signed a lease on 11 days earlier. My name was on the door. My name was on the lease. My name was on the building's mailbox in capital letters on a small white label I had printed and adhered myself at 9:15 in the morning. On the best Tuesday I had had in 2 years. Marcus called me at 5:47 that evening. I was standing in my new kitchen eating leftover pasta directly from the container because my table was still in the living room and I did not care even slightly. I let the call go to voicemail. His message was 4 sentences. "Clara, what the hell? Where is all your stuff? Why is there no power? Call me." I listened to it twice and then I set the phone face down on the counter and finished my pasta. I texted him 2 hours later, 8 words. "I moved out. I'll come get the rest." There was no rest. There was nothing left there that was mine, but I needed him to sit with that sentence for a while. His response was immediate. "You can't just do this." Then 40 seconds later, "What about the router?" I looked at experience sitting on my kitchen counter in its new home and experienced something very close to happiness. I did not respond to either message. Now I want to tell you about the Thursday, 6 days after the move, when the part of this story that happens in front of witnesses arrived. Because if you have been waiting for the public payoff, here it is, and it came from a direction I had not planned for, but which, in retrospect, was exactly right. There is a design community event in Columbus called the Studio Showcase. It happens twice yearly in a converted warehouse space on Parsons Avenue, and it is attended by architects, interior designers, developers, contractors, real estate agents, and the kind of clients who are serious about projects over $200,000. I had attended every one for 4 years as a Hargrove representative, which meant I attended in a branded shirt and stood at a table next to Brett while he collected the business cards. This was my first showcase as Whitfield Design Studio. I had a table of my own. I had printed business cards with my name in clean letterpress type. I had a portfolio bound in navy linen I had assembled over 5 late nights the previous week. I had done my hair and worn a charcoal blazer over a white silk blouse, and I felt for the first time in longer than I could accurately calculate entirely like myself. Marcus did not know I would be there. There was no reason he would know, because he had not known about the studio for 14 months and there was nothing in our disconnection over the previous 6 days that would have told him. He came to the showcase because Ryan Calder's development firm was a regular attendee, and Marcus sometimes came with Ryan to what he called prospecting events. I found this out in real time at approximately 7:20 in the evening when I looked up from a conversation with a developer named Greg Holloway and saw Marcus standing 12 feet away holding a glass of sparkling water, looking directly at my table, at my banner, at the words Whitfield Design Studio in 4-inch letters above a portfolio of work I had built in silence for 14 months. He walked over. I finished my sentence to Greg, handed him my card, and turned to face Marcus with the complete composure of someone who had been ready for this moment in one form or another for a very long time. "What is this?" Marcus said. His voice was low and controlled, but the low and controlled was doing a significant amount of work. "This is my studio," I said. 14 months, he said. "Approximately, yes." He looked at the banner again, then back at me. "You never said anything. You didn't ask." Ryan Calder appeared at Marcus's shoulder at that moment, saw me, and said with genuine warmth, "Hey, Clara, right? I didn't know you were in the design world." "She lives there," said a voice to my right, and I turned to find Christine Daly, who it turned out had been a regular showcase attendee for years, and who I had not known would be there, standing with a glass of red wine and an expression of uncomplicated satisfaction. I had not orchestrated this, I want to be clear about that. But sometimes the universe arranges a room the way a good editor arranges a paragraph. Every element in exactly the right place. Ryan looked at the portfolio on my tables, genuinely interested. "What's your specialty?" "Residential and boutique commercial," I said. "High-detail renovation, particularly in historic properties." Greg Holloway, who had drifted back into earshot, said, "She just described my whole portfolio." Greg Holloway, Holloway Development. He extended his hand to Ryan. They began talking. Marcus stood slightly outside the circle, holding his sparkling water. A woman named Dana Shu, who ran a mid-century modern renovation firm I had admired for 3 years, stopped at my table and picked up my portfolio. She turned pages slowly. "This bathroom," she said, pointing to a before and after spread. "This is yours?" "Completely," I said. "Client on the near north side. Original 1920s tile we sourced from an estate sale." Dana looked at me over the portfolio. "Are you taking on collaborations?" "I am now," I said. We exchanged cards. Marcus waited until there was a gap in the traffic around my table. He stepped forward and said quietly, "Can we talk?" "We are talking," I said. "I mean privately." I looked at him with the kind of patience you extend to someone who has not yet caught up with a conversation that is already over. "I don't think privately is necessary," I said. "I moved out. I started a business. Those aren't secrets." "You took the router," he said. "I did," I said. "I bought it." He stared at me. "And the power was in your name," I said. "I am no longer a resident." It seemed appropriate to leave the utilities to the account holder. He did not have a response to that one, because it was entirely reasonable, and he knew it, and the small crowd of people in our immediate radius who had been listening with varying degrees of discretion also knew it. "I thought things were good," he said. He said it with a sincerity that was genuine, which was the most painful thing about it. Not calculated. He actually thought things were good. "You told me to stay in the kitchen," I said. "At my own home, in front of your friends." He opened his mouth. It wasn't the first time," I said, and I stayed. And then I left. I turned back to the table because Dana Shu had returned with a colleague she wanted to introduce me to, and I had a business to run and a life to be present in. I heard Marcus say, behind me, to Ryan or to no one in particular, "I didn't know she had all this." Ryan said something I could not quite hear. I did not turn around. The weeks that followed were neither triumphant nor quiet. They were full, in the way that the right kind of full feels. Whitfield Design Studio had 6 active clients by the end of April. Christine Daly referred 2 of them. Dana Shu brought 1. Greg Holloway's development firm became a retainer client with an initial engagement worth $68,000. I hired my first part-time assistant, a design school graduate named Priya, who was methodical and funny and showed up every day as though she had also been waiting for exactly this kind of work. Marcus texted twice in the first week after the showcase. The first message was an apology that ran to 14 lines and used the phrase, "I had no idea you felt that way," 3 times. I read it, filed it under information received, and did not respond. The second was shorter. "I hope you're okay. I responded to that one." "I'm better than okay," I wrote. "I hope you are, too." I meant it. Not with warmth, not with residual attachment, but with the simple generosity that is available when you no longer need anything from someone. His mother Patrice, through what social channels I cannot fully reconstruct, reached me by email in early May. The email was 3 paragraphs and required me to read it twice to determine whether it was an apology or a performance of one. I concluded it was somewhere in the middle, which is perhaps the most honest thing Patrice had ever sent me. I wrote back 1 paragraph thanking her for reaching out. I did not engage further. There was nothing to resolve because I held no grievance that required her resolution. The table is set correctly in my new apartment, forks in precisely the configuration I prefer, and no one has an opinion about it. What I know now is the vantage point of the east-facing window on the 4th floor of my 3rd Avenue apartment is this: the kitchen was not a humiliation. It was a revelation. It showed me, with a clarity that 2 years of smaller moments had been building toward, exactly what I was being asked to be in that house and exactly what I refused to become. I did not leave because Marcus was a villain. I left because I was the author of my own story, and he had written me into a supporting role that I did not recognize as mine. I built the business in silence, not because I was secretive by nature, but because some things need the protection of privacy in order to grow. You do not plant seeds in a room full of people who are certain nothing will grow there. You find your quiet hours, your 6 to 8 mornings, your cold coffee, and your 47 bullet points, and your refundable $1,500 deposit on a suite you are not yet sure you deserve. And then one day, you are standing at a table at a showcase with your name on a banner, and a developer is asking you for your card, and you understand that you always deserved it. You were just waiting for the room to get quiet enough to hear yourself. If you are someone who has been standing in a kitchen somewhere, literally or otherwise, I want you to hear this. The quiet you are living in right now is not emptiness. It might be exactly the space where the thing you are going to build is taking its first shape. You do not have to announce it. You do not have to explain it. You just have to keep going in the hours when no one is watching. The witnesses come later. They always do. What would you have done in that kitchen? Would you have walked back out with the tray and smiled through the evening? Or would you have made a different choice? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And if there is a version of this story living somewhere inside you, subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly that. For every woman who built her comeback in silence and let it speak when it was ready. I will see you in the Seek story. I want to take a moment before we close to say something to you directly. The person who made it to the end of this. Not everyone does. You stayed because something in this story was worth staying for, and I think you know what that something is. Revenge Chronicles exists because the quietest stories are often the most powerful, and because the women who never yelled, never performed, never asked for an audience. They deserve one. Every story we tell here is built from the same material. Patience, precision, and the unshakable knowledge that you were worth more than the room you were given. If this one landed somewhere real for you, share it with a woman who needs it today. Subscribe so you are here for the next one. And remember, the loudest comebacks are built in silence. We will see you tomorrow.